There is a version of an empath that most people have never seen. Not the one who absorbs every emotion in the room. Not the one who stays up until 3 in the morning trying to fix someone else's problems. Not the one who forgives the same behavior 17 times because their heart simply cannot tolerate the idea of abandoning someone who is struggling. That version is familiar. That version is the one the world has learned to rely on, exploit, and take entirely for granted. But there is another version, the one that emerges when everything else has been exhausted, when the patience has finally run dry, when the forgiveness has nothing left to draw from, when the heart that once bent itself into impossible shapes to accommodate other people's dysfunction simply, quietly, straightens. That version is what we are talking about today. And if you are an empath who has been feeling something shifting inside you lately, something you cannot quite name but cannot ignore, then this message was made for you. The breaking point nobody warns you about. Carl Jung spent decades studying what happens to the human psyche when it is pushed beyond its natural threshold. His research led him to a concept he called enantiodromia, a Greek word meaning the point at which something transforms into its own opposite. He observed it in history, in nature, in the psychology of individuals. When any force is suppressed long enough, denied expression long enough, pushed underground long enough, it does not simply disappear, it accumulates. It builds pressure beneath the surface like water behind a dam, quietly, invisibly, with a patience that the person themselves often mistakes for healing. And then one day, not with drama, not with warning, the dam gives. For an empath, this moment is the breaking point nobody warns you about. Not because it is destructive, because it is transformative. The version of you that emerges on the other side of your limit is not the same person who walked up to it. What pushed you here? Let us be honest about how this happened. You did not arrive at your limit by accident. You arrived here through years of a very specific pattern, a pattern that looked from the outside like extraordinary generosity, and from the inside like slow suffocation. You absorbed what others could not carry. Not because anyone asked you to. Empaths rarely wait to be asked. You felt the weight in a room before anyone spoke. You sensed the tension in a relationship before it had a name. You picked up the grief, the anxiety, the unspoken anger of everyone around you, and you carried it alongside your own, without complaint, without recognition, without anyone ever asking how you were doing beneath all of that. You gave second chances to people who used them to hurt you again. You stayed in rooms that were slowly draining you because leaving felt like abandonment. You made yourself smaller so that other people could feel larger. And you told yourself this was love. In some ways it was, but it was also the most expensive thing you have ever done. And the bill has finally arrived. What actually happens at the limit here is what psychology understands about the moment an empath reaches their absolute threshold. The world expects a breakdown. People who have watched you bend and absorb and forgive for years assume that when you finally crack, it will look like collapse, tears, desperation, a cry for help. What actually happens is almost the opposite. Jung described a process of individuation, the psychological journey toward becoming fully and authentically oneself, as something that often begins not in comfort, but in crisis. Not in abundance, but in depletion. When an empath reaches their limit, the part of the psyche that has been suppressed for years, the part that knows how to say no, that recognizes manipulation, that understands its own worth without needing anyone to confirm it, that part finally surfaces. And when it surfaces, it does not surface gently. It surfaces with a clarity that feels almost cold to the people around you. You stop explaining yourself, not because you no longer care what people think, but because you have finally understood that your explanations were never landing anyway. that the people who needed you to justify your boundaries were the same people who would find fault with any justification you provided. You stop absorbing, not because you have lost your sensitivity, but because you have finally recognized the difference between empathy and sacrifice, between caring for someone and carrying them, between love and self-destruction dressed up as devotion. You stop waiting for the apology, waiting for the change, waiting for the moment when the person you invested everything in finally becomes who you believed they could be. You stop waiting because you have finally understood something that no amount of hope could have taught you. Some people are not becoming. They are simply being exactly who they have always been, exactly who they showed you they were, exactly who they will remain long after you are gone. And that understanding does not break you, it frees you. The transformation they did not see coming here is the part that catches people off guard. The empath at their limit does not become cold. They do not become cruel. They do not transform into the version of emotional unavailability that damaged them in the first place. They become precise. There is a difference, a significant, devastating difference between coldness and precision. Coldness is the absence of feeling. It is a wall built by someone who has given up on connection entirely. Precision is something else. It is the arrival of discernment, the ability to feel deeply while simultaneously being completely clear about who deserves access to that depth. It is the empath's extraordinary sensitivity finally turned inward, used to protect rather than only to give. The people who benefited from your previous version will notice the shift immediately, and they will not like it. They will call it coldness, arrogance, selfishness. What they are actually experiencing is the removal of a resource they had stopped paying for: your warmth, your patience, your limitless availability. These were never free. They simply appeared free because you were paying the price in silence, in sleepless nights, in quietly lost pieces of yourself. Now, the account is closed, and the people who never invested in you are discovering what it costs to exist without your energy. The unstoppable emergence. Jung used the word sovereign to describe the psychological state that becomes possible when a person has completed this transformation. Sovereign, not powerful in the aggressive sense, sovereign in the sense of self-governing, self-determining, no longer subject to the emotional weather of other people. An empath who has reached their limit and moved through it rather than collapsing under it becomes something that is genuinely difficult to describe to someone who has not witnessed it. They become present without being available to everyone. They become warm without being accessible to those who would abuse that warmth. They become connected, more connected than ever actually, because the connections they now maintain are chosen, genuine, and mutual in a way their previous relationships never were. The energy that was being drained by dozens of toxic connections now flows toward the few relationships that were always worth it, toward the work that was always calling them, toward the version of their life that had been waiting patiently behind all the chaos they were managing for everyone else. This is the unstoppable emergence. Not unstoppable because nothing can hurt you anymore. Unstoppable because you have finally decided that your life is worth building, that your dreams are worth pursuing, that your peace is not a luxury, but a foundation. And once an empath makes that decision, truly, completely, with their whole heart, the force with which they move forward is unlike anything they have ever experienced. Because they are no longer moving against resistance. They are moving with themselves for the first time. What this means for you right now. If something in this message landed in a place that felt uncomfortably accurate, if you recognized yourself in the pattern of absorbing and forgiving and waiting, then I want you to hear this directly. You are not too sensitive. You are not too much. You are not broken or difficult or impossible to love. You are an empath who has been operating in an environment that was never designed for someone like you. And the exhaustion you feel is not weakness. It is the honest response of an extraordinary person who has been giving at a level that no human being was designed to sustain indefinitely. Your limit is not your ending. It is your beginning. The version of you that exists on the other side of this, the one with boundaries that do not apologize for themselves, with energy that is invested rather than drained, with a clarity about their own worth that no one's opinion can touch. That version is not lost. They are waiting, right at the edge of everything you have been carrying. And the moment you set it down, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in the quiet, grounded recognition that it was never yours to carry, they will step forward, and nothing will be able to stop them.